we have the New York Knicks offseason guide is now up on ESPN.com. You can go out and take a look at it. And the big focus for me, of course, was the 2020-21 season where they won 41 games, more of kind of an outlier to what this rebuild is all about when Leon Rose took over in 2020. And I think that year was a little bit of fool's gold. 41-31, you get the 4th seed. You lose to Atlanta in 5 games. Everything kind of had to line up for you to get to that position. Certainly how Julius Randle played. You had more of a defensive identity. You had a new head coach in Tom Thibodeau. And then when you get to this year, more of a dose of reality. And when you look at it, for me, the big thing is the inability to close games. That's where there's a fine line between winning and losing in this league. And when you can't close games, whether it be lack of a quality point guard, poor shot selection, youth, the play of Randall, certain circumstances there, that takes you from a team that's a top 6 in the Eastern Conference to a team that's, as I said in the article, counting ping pong balls in mid-May here. And when you look at the Knicks, last year they were 9th in the NBA, 20-16 record, in games decided by 5 points or less with 5 minutes left in the 4th quarter. Okay, 20-16. You flip the switch now. That goes to 25th this year. I'm just looking at the article, 18-26. There's basically a 10-game swing here, and instead of 37 and 45, even if you split that, you're competing for the last play-in spot. So I do think a lot of that, the woes this year, has to do with the inability to finish games. And I mean, as you Knicks fans know, the crazy stat is that you've lost 8 games when leading by 15 points, most in the NBA. 4 games when leading by 20 points or more, the most in NBA history. So if I'm the front office, I'm sitting down with the coaches and I'm going through film and I'm coming up with a plan as far as what needs to be addressed as far as with this group so it doesn't ever happen again. And as I said, is it youth? 5 players under the age of 23. Is it a lack of point guard? Is it the loss of Derrick Rose that maybe camouflaged some of your weaknesses? Poor shot selection in the 4th quarter. So that's going to be probably, for me, step one. I think big picture approach here. This is still a retool/rebuild. As I said, last year was fool's gold. When you combine with the roster, a better Eastern Conference, I think this is kind of where this team probably should have been a year ago. And I know Leon Rose gets a lot of criticism because he doesn't address the media, rightfully so. I do think you have to be transparent with your fan base. You don't need to give them the secrets to the organization, but I do think the fans need to be part of the journey here. And he said it right. I mean, they have youth, they've got draft picks, they've got flexibility to kind of continue to build this roster. They've got their own first, which is going to be in the lottery. They've got a second. They've got 8 firsts in the next 7 years, including that Dallas first. You've got 14 seconds, and then you have those tradable contracts. 12 players between $18 million and $1.6 million. So there is that flexibility. First time since 2018 that they don't have cap space, which sometimes is fine. You have your $10.3 million mid-level. You've got your $4.1 million biannual. The free agency of Mitchell Robinson to figure out, and we'll talk about him in a minute here. So there are resources to this roster to improve. It's not dead end, but I think what happened was you win 41 games a year ago, and now everyone's expecting, you know what, we're going to be up there as a top 3. And I think you got to kind of take a step back and really just take a big picture approach as far as what you're trying to do here. Randall is going to be interesting for me is, he's entering year 1 of this $106 million extension. The interesting thing, he's got this huge trade bonus. So even if he was traded, it's like $11.5 million, and Knicks would be responsible to pay that. you get split up and it added to his cap, and that's a little bit of a poison pill there. So I would keep an eye on everyone saying, you know what, we need to trade Julius Randle. Not as easy as you think. The contract is still value. It's outside of the top 50 among salaries, and for a guy coming off an all-star year 2 years ago, I do think it's a value contract. But here's the thing that's interesting with Randle, and our great group at ESPN Stats and Info pulled this number up. Randle shot 32.6% on jumpers this season. Okay, last year it was at 42.2. 42.2 number is the highest ever in the last since 2015-16. These are his numbers since that 15-16 on jump shots. 25.6, 35.2, 26.2, 36.4, 32.6, last year 42.2, and now 32.6. Like, if you think last year was an anomaly, I think you're right. The body of work shows that Julius Randle is not a good jump shooter. And maybe it changes this year. And I think, Tibbs said it best, like when he's at his best, he's running the floor, right? Attacking the rim, not settling for jump shots. And that's going to be the big piece. You got to figure out if you can play him and Obi Toppin together. There's limited body of work there. I think there was 200 and Cleaning the Glass, which is another great site, 209 possessions all year, plus 0.4 per 100. So you don't know what the body of work is going to be. And Toppin certainly had a good, strong stretch, 20-7, 57% from the field, 43.6 from three. Can those two players coexist on the court here? So I'm not ready to give up on Julius Randle, but I do think he has to realize kind of who he is. He's more of the player that we probably saw in New Orleans and the Lakers and in the early stages in New York, and not this player that, let's face it, had no fans in the building in 2021 and shot the lights out of the ball. Now he's kind of reverted back to his old self. RJ Barrett is extension eligible. For me personally, I do not see him as a max contract. I don't see him like John Morant. He's a non-max guy. I think he's a 4 for 90 type guy in the mid-20s here. He's had a good year. He's taken a nice step. I mean, 11 30-point games, the most by a player age 21 or younger this year. You have to figure out as far as what his number is going to be. He's got a 32.7 cap hold as a free agent in 23. So if that number comes in at 23, 24 million, you still have that flexibility. But as we've talked about in these videos, those non-max guys, the non-Ja Morants, are the hardest contracts to negotiate because you're only negotiating against the clock, not a team that has cap space here. So you've got to figure out as far as what to do with RJ Barrett. Do you see him as a trade asset? Remember, once you sign this player or any player to an extension, he's basically untradeable for another year. So what happens if that dream of an all-NBA player becomes available on the board? You basically take Barrett off the board as far as from a trade standpoint. So he's extension eligible right until the start of the season. Unless the Knicks are going to give him a max contract, which I don't think so, this will get dragged out over the 3 months of the offseason here. And then the last thing is Mitchell Robinson. What do you do with Mitchell Robinson? The Knicks last year, they bet on the fact that, they didn't want to expose themselves to maybe a liability with a new contract for a player coming off injury. When I say that, he had a $1.8 million team option. If they had declined that team option last year, he would have been a restricted free agent. Now they exercised the option. He becomes an unrestricted free agent, and now he's free to go out and sign with any team. And I said it in here, like the broken right foot, for me would have caused concern. And I understood that the Knicks thinking that if we sign this guy to a $6 or $7 million contract, there's more liability and exposure compared to letting him become an unrestricted free agent in 2022. I think he's a $13, $14 million player. I don't see him 18 to 20. I don't think the market is out there for an 18 to 20 million dollar player. Centers are, unless you're Jokic and Embiid, centers aren't making 25, 26 million dollars. They're not making 20 million. Robert Williams is a great. We're going to be using Robert Williams for a long time as far as a good comp. If Mitchell Robinson thinks he's going to get more than Robert Williams, I think he's going to be on the market for a long time this offseason. And I think he has to have a reality check that he is not a $16 to $18 million player. For me, 4 for 50, somewhere in that range, 4 for 54. So that's kind of the big picture of the Knicks. I wouldn't lose hope on this organization here. 37-45. I know you go from the 4 seed to the lottery, take a step back. There's certainly a lot of avenues that you can go out and improve. It's going to have to start with your younger players. You got to go out and find a point guard. I mean, do you think Emmanuel Quickley is your point guard of your future? You got to figure out what to do with Kemba Walker. Certainly from a buyout standpoint or from a trade asset. A lot of different moving parts here, but the Knicks are not like it is 4 or 5 years ago, where kind of you've got dead weight contracts and you're just kind of biding time. So don't lose hope. ESPN.com. You can go out and find that Knicks article right now.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.